California is home to more than 15 million renters, and in 2026, a growing number of those households are spending more of their monthly income on housing than at any point in the state's recorded history. The data published by state agencies, federal housing authorities, and independent research institutions tells a consistent story. Rents across the state's major markets remain at levels that are historically high. The legal framework that governs how much landlords can raise rents is more layered and locally varied than most tenants understand. And the share of California renters classified as cost-burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their household income on rent, now stands at 55% of all renter households statewide, according to the most recent American Community Survey data analyzed by the National Association of Home Builders. This is the factual picture of California's rental market as it stands in early 2026, according to official data from the California Attorney General's Office, the California Department of Justice, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. Census Bureau, and published market research from Rent Cafe, Zumper, and the USC Lusk Center for Real Estate. The starting point for understanding California's rental market in 2026 is the statewide rent cap established under Assembly Bill 1482, formerly known as the California Tenant Protection Act of 2019. This law limits how much a landlord can raise rent in any 12-month period for covered properties. The formula is set by the law as 5% plus the applicable regional consumer price index, with a maximum allowable increase of 10% regardless of how high inflation climbs in any given year. Consumer Price Index figures used to calculate allowable increases are published annually by the Bureau of Labor Statistics and applied to specific regional areas within California rather than to the state as a whole. For the period running from August 1, 2025, through July 31, 2026, the allowable rent increase caps vary by region. In the Los Angeles and Long Beach metropolitan area, the regional CPI was measured at 3%, making the maximum allowable increase under AB 1482 8% for that area. In the San Diego region, the CPI used for the calculation was higher, placing the allowable cap at 8.8%. In the Bay Area, the applicable CPI produced a cap of 6.3%. These figures represent the legal maximum for properties covered by the law. Many landlords do not raise rent to the maximum allowed, and many properties are not covered by AB 1482 at all. The law applies to most multi-family residential properties that are more than 15 years old. It does not apply to units built after January 1, 2005, to single-family homes owned by individual landlords in most circumstances, to certain affordable housing developments, to dormitories, or to owner-occupied duplexes. For properties not covered by AB 1482, there is no statewide cap on rent increases whatsoever. Within that legal structure, the actual rent levels across California's major markets in February 2026 reflect years of accumulated increases that have pushed costs well above the national average. In San Francisco, data published by Zumper in February 2026 placed the median rent for all unit types at $3,745 per month. That figure is 97% higher than the national average, or approximately $1,845 more per month than the median rent in the United States as a whole. Year over year, San Francisco rents increased by 15% according to Zumper's rolling 30-day analysis. Rent Cafe's market analysis, last updated February 21, 2026 and drawing on data from Yardi Matrix and the U.S. Census Bureau, placed the average rent for an apartment in San Francisco at $3,580 per month, reflecting a 5.8% increase compared to the previous year. A one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco averaged $3,411 per month according to Rent Cafe, while a two-bedroom unit averaged $4,603. In Los Angeles, the picture is different in scale but similar in direction. Rent Cafe's February 2026 data placed the average rent for an apartment in Los Angeles at $2,740 per month, a figure essentially flat compared to the prior year, down by a fraction of 1%. A studio apartment averaged $1,967, a one-bedroom averaged $2,534. A two-bedroom averaged $3,337. The USC Kasdan Real Estate Economics Forecast, which projects rental trends for Southern California markets, placed the Los Angeles area rent at approximately $2,269 for July 2024 and forecast growth to approximately $2,334 by July 2026, representing an average annual increase of approximately 1.46% in that market projection. The Bay Area as a whole shows a different picture from San Francisco City proper. Zillow's rental market trend data placed the median rent across the Bay Area region at $4,125 per month based on July 2024 figures, a number that is 93% above the national median. This figure reflects the combined weight of markets including San Jose, Oakland, Berkeley, and surrounding cities, which individually vary significantly in rent levels. Oakland, for instance, ranks as more affordable within the Bay Area context, with median rents for some unit types closer to $2,000 per month according to market research published by Zumper. San Jose's rental market has seen pressure from continued tech sector employment demand and limited new housing supply. Orange County represents one of the most expensive rental markets in Southern California despite its suburban character. The USC Kasdan forecast projected an average annual rent increase of 2.34% for Orange County, with the average rent at approximately $2,653 in July 2024 and a forecast of approximately $2,786 by July 2026. The report noted that Orange County is experiencing intensified outmigration, with residents leaving for more affordable markets, while high rents in coastal areas continue to push households to relocate. Ventura County showed even higher projected annual growth, at 3.18% per year, driven by limited multi-family housing options relative to demand. The Inland Empire, covering Riverside and San Bernardino counties, has historically served as a lower-cost alternative for households priced out of coastal markets. The USC Kasdan forecast projected rent growth of approximately 3.2% annually in the Inland Empire, with average rents starting at approximately $2,046 in July 2024 and forecast to reach approximately $2,211 by July 2026. Even at those lower levels, the gap between regional incomes and housing costs remains significant for many households in that area. Across California as a whole, the median monthly rent was reported at $2,104 in 2024 by the U.S. Census Bureau, as cited in a September 2025 analysis by the Davis Vanguard. That figure represented the most expensive statewide median among all 50 states, and it was 60% above the national median of $1,319 at the same time. Statewide rents rose 30% in California between 2019 and 2024 according to the same analysis, though that rate of increase ranked 32nd nationally during that period. States including Idaho, which saw 57% growth, and Arizona, which saw 52% growth, experienced faster acceleration in absolute percentage terms during the same 5 years. What makes California's rental situation particularly severe relative to other states is not only the level of rents but the gap between those rents and household incomes. Research published by the Gender Equity Policy Institute in June 2024, drawing on U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey data, found that 56% of California renting households are rent-burdened, spending more than 30% of their household income on housing costs. That share represents a 55% increase from 1970. 30% of California renting households are severely rent-burdened, meaning they spend more than 50% of household income on housing. That figure represents a 65% increase from the same 1970 baseline. A conference held at California Lutheran University on February 19, 2026, titled California's Housing Crisis: Roots of the Problem and What Lies Ahead, released research finding that nearly one-third of California renters spend over 50% of their income on rent and utilities as of 2026. The California Budget Center has documented that among renter households earning less than $75,000 annually, 83% were housing cost burdened in 2022. Among households earning less than $35,000 annually, 92% of renter households were classified as cost burdened. These figures reflect the structural mismatch between the income distribution of California's renting population and the cost of available housing units. The data published by the Davis Vanguard analysis also noted that of California's 6.1 million rental households, 1.6 million were classified as extremely burdened, spending more than half their income on rent alone. That group accounts for 56% of all cost-stressed households in the state. These are households that, by standard measures used by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, are at elevated risk of housing instability, eviction, and homelessness. Research cited by the California Budget Center has found that severely cost-burdened households are more likely to forego spending on food and medical care in order to maintain housing payments. California's own reported homelessness data reinforces this picture. State figures cited by CalMatters showed that throughout 2023, more than 300,000 people accessed homeless services through local agencies, with approximately 220,000 being single adults and approximately 116,000 being individuals and families with children. Los Angeles County, the state's most populous county, accounted for the highest concentration, with approximately 100,000 people accessing homeless services in that county alone. The conference at California Lutheran University described homelessness in California as having reached record levels in 2026 in its published conference summary. Against this backdrop, the regulatory environment governing rent in 2026 also changed in specific ways at the local level, particularly in Los Angeles. As of February 2, 2026, landlords of units covered by the Los Angeles Rent Stabilization Ordinance, commonly called LARSO, can only raise rents by up to 3% for every 12 months, according to updated guidance published by the tenant advocacy organization SAGE in January 2026. This represents a change from the prior structure, which had allowed a 1% additional increase tied to gas or electricity costs, an allowance that has now been phased out as part of the city's recent revision of the ordinance. Additionally, landlords are no longer permitted to raise rents by 10% when additional dependents are added to a lease, a provision that previously applied to rent-stabilized units in the city. For units in unincorporated Los Angeles County under the Rent Stabilization and Protection Ordinance, the maximum allowable rent increase from July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026 is 1.93% for most units, with a slightly higher limit of 2.93% available to landlords who self-certify as small property owners with the county's Department of Business and Consumer Affairs, and a maximum of 3.93% for luxury units as defined under that ordinance. A new law that took effect in 2026 also directly addressed the use of algorithmic pricing tools in the rental market. Assembly Bill 325, which closed loopholes in California's Cartwright Act, now applies the state's antitrust framework to corporations that use automated pricing algorithms to coordinate rental prices across markets. These tools, used by some large property management companies and institutional landlords, have been cited by tenant advocates as a factor driving above-market rent increases in multiple states. The new California law makes such coordination subject to antitrust enforcement in ways that were previously contested under existing law. Another new requirement under Assembly Bill 628 mandates that landlords of most California rental units provide working refrigerators and stoves. Prior to this change, there was no general statewide requirement for landlords to supply these appliances. Rental units that lack functioning refrigerators and stoves will now generally be considered uninhabitable under the updated standard, giving tenants a specific legal basis to address the absence of these appliances through habitability claims or rent withholding in some circumstances. California also enacted the Social Security Tenant Protection Act, codified as Assembly Bill 246, which allows tenants to use Social Security hardship as an affirmative legal defense in eviction proceedings based on non-payment of rent. This provision is relevant for the significant number of California renters who rely on Social Security income, which is fixed and does not adjust rapidly in response to rent increases. The law does not eliminate the tenant's obligation to pay back rent, but it provides a procedural defense that can delay or complicate eviction proceedings in cases where a tenant can demonstrate that Social Security payment delays or reductions contributed to their inability to pay. This law is set to remain in effect until January 20, 2029. For properties not covered by AB 1482, the absence of any statewide rent cap means landlords can raise rents by any amount, subject only to notice requirements. California law requires landlords to provide at least 30 days written notice for rent increases of 10% or less. For increases exceeding 10%, a minimum of 90 days written notice is required. Notice must be provided in writing and cannot be delivered only by phone, text message, or verbal communication. These notice requirements apply statewide regardless of whether a property is covered by AB 1482's cap provisions. The USC Kasdan forecast's broader observation about California's housing market identified a significant constraint on the supply side of the rental market. California contributed only 0.67% to the national stock of new housing in recent years, a figure substantially below its population share. The forecast cited tight lending environments, stringent local zoning policies, high developer fees, and rent control measures as factors that have limited the ability of builders to bring new rental units to market at the rate needed to relieve pressure on existing supply. This supply constraint is a structural feature of California's rental market that operates independently of the specific rent cap figures published each year under AB 1482. As of February 2026, the legal cap on rent increases for AB 1482 covered properties remains in effect at the regional levels described above, running through July 31, 2026, at which point new CPI data will be used to calculate updated caps for the following 12-month period. The Los Angeles LARSO 3% cap has been in effect since February 2, 2026. The AB 325 algorithmic pricing law and the AB 628 appliance requirement are both in effect. The AB 246 Social Security hardship defense is available to eligible tenants in qualifying eviction proceedings. Further developments are expected as the state legislature considers additional housing proposals and as new consumer price index data becomes available to set the next cycle of allowable rent increases under AB 1482.